I want to tell you something nobody who has ever been in a coma says plainly. You do not return in one heroic moment. You return in fragments, a twitch in one hand, a sound you cannot place, the smell of antiseptic, the unbearable heaviness of your own body remembering it still belongs to you. And before your eyes open, before your mouth works, before your thoughts line up in any useful way, your ears arrive first. Mine arrived in time to hear the most absurd sentence of my life. Welcome back to Father's Last Word. Get comfortable and remember, everyone in these stories had a chance to do the decent thing. They simply chose otherwise. Leave a comment and subscribe. That was me, Calvin Reed, 60 years old, retired home builder, a man who spent 34 years putting roofs over other people's heads and then nearly died at 1:17 on a Friday afternoon in September while standing in his own kitchen making tomato soup and a grilled ham sandwich. You cannot improve on irony like that. You can only survive it. I had been unconscious for 19 days. 19 days while the world continued without my permission. 19 days while people made decisions in rooms I could not enter and signed things with hands that should never have touched what was mine. And believe me, they used every minute. Before I tell you what happened after I woke up, you need to understand something about my daughter, Claire. I raised that girl alone from the time she was 8. Her mother left. I did not. I worked early jobs, late jobs, ugly jobs, jobs that left sawdust in my hair and blood in the cracks of my knuckles. I packed lunches. I learned ponytails poorly and then better. I sat through piano recitals and softball games and science fairs built out of cardboard and hope. I drove across Louisville at midnight once because she called from a parking lot crying over a boy who was not worth the gasoline it took to go get her. I went anyway. I gave her everything I had in me. So when she walked into my hospital room on the morning I finally opened my eyes, I smiled. Even through the tubes. Even through the dryness in my throat. Even through the pain that made my bones feel borrowed. I smiled, because she was the first person I wanted to see. She stood in the doorway holding a coffee cup, dark hair tied back. That blue wool coat I bought her for Christmas 3 winters earlier wrapped around her like armor. And there was something on her face I had never seen before. Not relief, not joy. Something tighter, prepared, almost practiced. I tried to speak. What came out was barely a sound. Claire. She crossed the room slowly, set the coffee on the side table, pulled the chair closer, and sat down. She did not hug me. She folded her hands in her lap and said, "Dad, how are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," I whispered. Then the truck backed up to make sure. She gave me a small smile and leaned in for a hug that felt less like affection than compliance. 2 light pats on my shoulder. Then she sat back. I told myself she was frightened, that people do strange things with fear, that sometimes love gets buried under panic and exhaustion and paperwork and hospital lighting. I let it pass. The doctors came in later and explained the facts. Brain aneurysm, emergency surgery, good response, lucky timing. Recovery would be slow, 6 to 8 weeks before I could safely go home. Physical therapy, monitoring, rest. None of that frightened me. I had a home to go back to, a house on Hawthorne Street in Louisville. 3 bedrooms, brick, front porch, white trim I repainted twice because I hated the first shade I chose. I bought it 26 years earlier and rebuilt it room by room over 2 decades. Crown molding in the living room cut and fitted by hand. Hardwood floors I laid on my knees one winter when Claire was 12 and kept bringing me nails I had not asked for just to feel involved. Kitchen cabinets I built in my garage and installed myself over one long August when the air was so hot the wood seemed to sweat. That house was not just a house. It was evidence. Evidence that a life of work had become something solid. Claire visited 4 more times over the next 2.5 weeks. Each visit shorter than the one before it. Each smile thinner. each embrace somehow less human than the last. I noticed, but I explained it away. She has her own life. Nathan's family is hovering. You know how young marriages go. Nathan, her husband of 4 years, had always struck me as the kind of man who entered a room apologizing to it. Not weak exactly, just unfinished. 35 years old, soft handshake, clean shoes, careful voice, the permanent expression of someone who had spent his life letting stronger personalities do his deciding for him. And then, there was his mother, Evelyn Mercer. Lord. Picture a woman who smiles as if she invented warmth and wants credit for distributing it. The sort who arrives with lemon bars and leaves with information. The sort who calls you Calvin, dear, in a voice sweet enough to rot your teeth while her eyes inventory your furniture and assess your square footage. Evelyn had taken an interest in my house years earlier. Little comments over holiday dinners. Calvin, this kitchen could be just beautiful with a center island. Have you ever considered downsizing? Hawthorne Street is such a valuable area now. One person really doesn't need that much space. I would smile, hand someone the potatoes, and store the comment where I store all comments that are too polished to be innocent. Now here is where the story bends. It was a Monday morning in week 5 of my recovery. A nurse named Monica, bless that woman, was helping me with my physical therapy exercises when Claire walked in unannounced. Same blue coat, same coffee cup. Same expression that told me whatever was about to happen had already been decided elsewhere. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something," she said. "About the house." I kept squeezing the therapy ball in my hand. "What about it?" She exhaled. I knew that exhale. I had heard it when she told me she backed my truck into a mailbox when she was 17. I heard it when she told me she had quit graduate school halfway through the semester. It was the sound of a door already opened behind your back. "While you were unconscious," she said carefully, "Nathan and I had to make some decisions. Financial decisions." Claire. Just her name. Nothing else. But Monica quietly set down the clipboard and found something very pressing to do in the hallway. "There was a power of attorney," Claire said. "You signed it years ago, when you had the shoulder surgery. You said if anything happened, I should handle things." "I know what I signed." She stared at the floor. "We had to use it." The therapy ball stopped in my hand. "To do what?" She looked at the window, at the coffee cup, at the blanket over my legs, everywhere except my face. "The house has been transferred," she said, "into Evelyn and Richard Mercer's names. It was the easiest way to manage the medical costs and keep everything stable while you were—" I dropped the ball. It hit the hospital floor once, twice, rolled beneath the bed, and for perhaps 15 seconds, that was the only sound in the room. Then I looked at my daughter, the girl I raised, the girl I fed and carried and sat awake for and built a life around, the girl wearing the coat I bought with money earned under roofs and ladders and winter wind. And I said very quietly, "Get out. Dad, get out." She left. I stared at the ceiling for 3 straight hours. No calls, no questions, no movement. Because Claire did not know something. Evelyn did not know it either. Neither did Richard, Nathan, or whatever lawyer had helped them draw up their neat little theft. There was a second property, a cedar cabin on Glass Hollow Lake, 50 minutes outside Lexington, left to me by my Uncle Frank 16 years earlier and held under the Reed Family Legacy Trust. Not in my personal estate, not in my annual filings, not on any simple property search Evelyn Mercer and her powdered sugar smile would ever have known how to run. I had not mentioned that place to anyone in over a decade. I picked up my phone and called Elias Turner. He answered on the second ring. "Cal." "Elias," I said, and my voice was calmer than I felt. "I need you to pull the trust. All of it. Every document. And I need to know the current condition of the lake cabin." A pause. Then, What happened? I nearly laughed. While I was asleep, I said, somebody forgot that a man who builds houses rarely stops at one. Elias had known me for 31 years. Lawyer second, friend first. He understood tone. He said only, I'll pull the files. And just like that, it had begun. They simply did not know it yet. If you've made it this far, do one quick thing and subscribe. Most people never do, but it helps more than you think. Thank you. They discharged me on a Wednesday morning. No balloons. No family waiting at the curb. No daughter carrying a bag and an apology. Just Monica, a wheelchair I did not need but hospital rules required, and a plastic bag containing my wallet, my watch, and the clothes I had been wearing the day my brain decided to rupture my schedule. Elias picked me up. He drove the same charcoal Volvo he had been driving since 2020 because, according to him, a car that behaves deserves to stay. He took one look at me easing into the passenger seat and said, "You look terrible." "Thank you, Elias. That means a lot at a vulnerable moment." "I'm serious. You've lost weight." "I have been busy not dying." He handed me a coffee. Black, 1 sugar. Exactly right. We drove in silence for 10 minutes, the kind of silence that only exists between men who have known each other too long to fill every inch of it. Then he said, "The trust is intact. The cabin is yours. Clean title. The Reed Family Legacy Trust never touched your personal estate, never merged, never crossed into any marital or medical authority. Your uncle's attorney knew what he was doing." I wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. "So they have no claim." "None. Not even a theoretical one." I looked out at the highway, people going to jobs, running errands, buying groceries, living ordinary Wednesdays, and I was sitting there 60 years old, newly conscious, technically homeless by my own daughter's hand. "What about Hawthorne Street?" Elias made a sound between a sigh and a laugh. "That," he said, "is where it gets interesting." I turned toward him. "The power of attorney you signed in 2015 included a termination clause, standard but important. It became void the moment you regained legal capacity." "Meaning?" "Meaning the instant you woke up and were deemed competent, Claire's authority ended. Anything executed after that point was executed without legal power." I stared at him. He kept his eyes on the road, but there was the faintest smile at one corner of his mouth. "Elias, are you telling me they transferred my house illegally?" "I'm telling you a judge is highly likely to enjoy that argument." I leaned back slowly. "You want a file now?" "I want to wait," he said. "Long enough for them to settle. Long enough for them to believe stability equals ownership. Then we file with precision. You want them comfortable. I want them careless." That was Elias. Never loud, never dramatic, just accurate. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need to tell you about the cabin because it matters. The cabin sat on 4.5 acres off Route 62, hidden behind tall sycamores and a gravel drive that curved toward the water like it was trying not to be noticed. From the outside, it was modest. Cedar siding silvered by time, stone chimney, deep front porch running the length of the house, a view over Glass Hollow Lake that made silence feel expensive. I had not been there in 12 years, not since the summer Uncle Frank died. I drove out alone after the funeral, sat on the porch until dusk, cried once, locked the door, and did not come back. Some places hold too much history to visit casually. Elias turned into the drive and stopped the car. We both looked at it for a while. The porch railing needed work. The grass had gone wild in the forgiving way wild things do when no one is looking. The place looked lonely, but not broken. "How bad inside?" Elias asked. "I honestly don't know." I opened the door and stepped out. It was not bad. That is the thing about well-built houses. They wait. The roof held. The original pine floors were dusty but sound. The stone fireplace was perfect. The kitchen was old-fashioned but usable. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, mudroom in the back, a dock stretching over the lake with 2 loose boards, and enough stubbornness left in it to be saved. I stood on that dock for a long time. The water barely moved. Light slid across it in long, quiet bands. A heron stood at the far bank like a witness who had seen too much to be impressed by any of it. And standing there, something in me cleared. Not healed. I was nowhere near healed. But clear. The coma fog, the hospital rage, the humiliation, all of it settled just enough for the structure underneath to show. And underneath it was this. I was still me, a man with a plan, a piece of land, and the patience to let work finish properly. I went back inside and called Ruth Calder. Now Ruth requires explanation. She had lived 2 houses down from me on Hawthorne Street for 20 years. 72 years old, tiny, sharp, grew roses that won county competitions, sat on her porch with the level of civic commitment usually associated with intelligence agencies. If something happened on Hawthorne Street, Ruth knew before the people inside the houses did. She answered on the first ring. "Well, look who has decided to return from the dead." "Good to hear your bedside manner survived," I said. "I've had no complaints. How are you?" "Better. Ruth, I need to ask something, and I need the truth." "Calvin, when have I ever given you anything else?" "Fair." "The house. What happened while I was in the hospital?" A pause. I could hear her adjusting in the porch swing. "Well," she said, "about 6 days after the ambulance took you, Evelyn Mercer started checking your mailbox. Then she started coming with Richard. Then came a locksmith." I closed my eyes. "A locksmith." "I took photographs." I laughed once, softly, because sometimes salvation arrives wearing gardening gloves. "Ruth." "I did not know exactly what was happening," she said, "but I knew it was something. So yes, I have photographs, dates, times, delivery trucks too, furniture, new curtains, all of it. Sometimes the most powerful person in any story is a retired woman with a porch, a phone camera, and a complete absence of interest in minding her own business. "I could kiss you." "You can thank me when you have your house back," she said. "And Calvin?" "Yes." "She put beige curtains in your living room." I sat down in the kitchen of the cabin and rubbed a hand over my face. "That's criminal even before we get to the fraud." That was my assessment as well. Over the next 4 weeks, I did exactly what needed doing. Elias assembled the case quietly. Expired authority, recovery records, transfer dates, Ruth's photographs, timeline, all of it. He did not file yet. He built. And while he built, I rebuilt too. I called in 2 men from my old crew, both retired, both still offended by sloppy workmanship, and together we brought the cabin back to life. Not frantically, methodically. We replaced the porch railing, sanded and stained the cedar a deep walnut that made the silver-gray trim stand out like intention. Refinished the pine floors until they glowed, updated the kitchen without erasing its age, installed better fixtures, repaired the dock and reinforced the frame, added 2 Adirondack chairs at the end facing the lake. I want you to understand something. That place had stood empty for 12 years. In under a month, with my body still weak and my balance still not entirely trustworthy, I made it beautiful again. Meanwhile, on Hawthorne Street, Evelyn Mercer was redecorating my life. I know because Ruth kept me informed. "She hosted a dinner party," Ruth reported one evening. "I counted 11 cars." "Good. She has your den arranged around a glass coffee table that looks nervous." "Excellent. Richard is parking in your garage now." "Of course he is." "And Claire and Nathan have moved into your bedroom." That one landed. My bedroom. The room I painted the winter after Claire left for college because I finally had time to choose a color without consulting anyone. "Good," I said again. because by then I understood something very clearly. Comfort is useful. Comfort makes people drop their guard. It was a quiet Thursday evening, exactly 5 weeks after I left the hospital, when Elias called. I was sitting at the end of the repaired dock, one of the Adirondack chairs under me, coffee cooling in my hand, watching sunset move over the lake. "Everything is ready," he said. "You're sure?" "The transfer is void. I have 3 separate legal reviews. I have medical documentation. I have Ruth's photographs. I have their timeline. And," he said, "I found something else." "What kind of something else?" "The kind that means Evelyn and Richard Mercer do not merely lose your house." I watched the heron lift off from the reeds and cut slowly across the dark water. "The kind that means what?" "The kind that proves this was not their first time." I said nothing. "Come in tomorrow," Elias said. "I'll show you." His office sat on the second floor of an old brick building downtown. Same furniture he had 15 years earlier. Same brass lamp on the corner of the desk. Same sense that if you brought him a problem, it would leave smaller than it arrived. He laid the file in front of me and said, "7 years ago, in Pima County, Arizona, Evelyn and Richard lived next door to an elderly widower named Leonard Price." I read, "Leonard suffered a stroke. Daughter lived out of state. Temporary authority given to a younger family connection through church. Property transferred into an LLC tied quietly to Richard Mercer. Case reviewed, never prosecuted. Family lacked resources, evidence scattered, the Mercers relocated." I looked up. "A pattern." "Yes." "God." Elias folded his hands. "Your case is not just your case. It demonstrates method. That matters in front of a judge. It also matters because Leonard Price had a daughter. She lives in Portland now." I thought about Leonard for perhaps 3 seconds. "Send her everything." "I already suspected you'd say that." I sat there a moment longer looking at the file. Some people steal once and call it circumstance. Some people steal twice and call it competence. The Mercers, apparently, had turned it into a practice. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I wore a charcoal suit, clean lines, nothing flashy, nothing sentimental, just right. Elias and I arrived early. We sat at the petitioner's table, and 11 minutes later, Evelyn and Richard entered with their attorney, a tall man with polished shoes and the particular overconfidence of someone who had not yet been informed how doomed his position was. Evelyn saw me immediately, and I want to describe what happened to her face carefully. She had entered smiling, that practiced social smile, shoulders back, expression arranged into composed concern. Then she saw me standing there in a charcoal suit, upright, alert, very much not buried, and she realized, perhaps for the first time, that the man she had reduced in her imagination to a hospital bed and a document had not stayed reduced. The smile did not collapse. It simply stopped. Richard looked downward. Nathan came too, because of course he did. Men like Nathan arrive when told. He sat in the gallery and could not bring himself to meet my eyes, which told me he understood far more than he had ever admitted out loud. The judge was the Honorable Miriam Glass, late 50s, silver frames, the expression of a woman who had heard every variation of "we thought it was fine" known to modern civilization and remained unimpressed by all of them. She reviewed Elias's filing. She reviewed the response. She asked 4 questions. With each answer, the attorney's confidence diminished visibly. Then she looked over the documents again and said, "The power of attorney ceased upon restoration of the petitioner's legal capacity. Any property transfer executed thereafter lacked authority. The transfer is therefore invalid." A few more sentences followed. Administrative. Necessary. But those were the only ones that mattered. Invalid. That was all. 26 years of my life came back to me in one calm, judicial voice. Richard sat very still. Their attorney leaned in to whisper. Evelyn did something fascinating then. She reached for the last defense available to people like her. She straightened further, lifted her chin, and arranged her face into dignified injury, as if she were the wounded party, as if she were the one who had awakened in a hospital bed to find her life reassigned. Outside the courtroom in the corridor, after it was done, I stood by the window with coffee from the vending cart. Terrible coffee, entirely appropriate to the occasion. I heard heels behind me. Evelyn, alone this time. No Richard, no attorney, no son, no daughter-in-law to perform kindness for. Just Evelyn Mercer and the wreckage of her certainty. She stopped a few feet from me. "You did not have to do this publicly," she said. "You could have spoken to us." I turned and looked at her. Did Leonard Price get that option? It was a small change in her expression. Not dramatic, but there. "I don't know what Elias has been telling you." "Enough," I said. She went quiet. "And Leonard's daughter knows enough now, too. Whatever she felt then, I will not call it guilt. I do not know that guilt was a language she truly spoke. What crossed her face was something older and less dignified. Exposure. The look of a person who has spent years operating in half-light and just discovered someone found the switch. She walked away. I watched her go and felt nothing generous. I moved back into the Hawthorne Street house on a Saturday. Ruth was on her porch when I pulled into the driveway. She stood, crossed to the edge of her lawn, and watched me get out. I hugged her properly. She patted my back twice, which in Ruth's emotional system amounted to a parade. "The curtains," she said when I stepped back. "They're going today." "Good." She returned to her roses. The house smelled wrong when I opened the door. Different candles, foreign laundry soap, the stale trace of people who had occupied a place without understanding it. I opened every window. Then I stood in the center of my living room, under my crown molding, on my floors, in the room I shaped with my own hands, and breathed. I called Elias. "I'm inside." "And?" I looked up at the molding I installed in 2004, when Claire was 14 and insisted on handing me every piece even though most of them were too long for her to carry. "It feels like mine," I said. Claire came over 3 weeks later. No blue coat this time. Just my daughter. Tired around the eyes. The face of someone who has spent too much time looking at herself honestly and not enjoyed the experience. She brought food. Not a casserole, thank God. Roast chicken, bread, groceries. The energy of someone who had rehearsed an apology so often the edges had started to wear off. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table. We ate for a while in silence. Then she said, "Nathan and I are in counseling." "Good. I don't know if it will fix anything." "That is not the only purpose of counseling." She nodded, picked at the bread. "I keep hearing what you said, about watching Evelyn, about asking myself who she has really been to me." I waited. Claire looked down at her hands. "I think I was afraid of her for years and kept calling it respect because that sounded better. That was one of the truest things I heard all year." I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. "I know." She did not cry. Neither did I. Adults do not always earn that release when they need it. We sat there in the afternoon light, father and daughter, both older than we had been before any of this began. Love does not erase damage. It decides whether the damage gets to be the final word. That matters. The lake cabin, by the way, is beautiful now. I rent it out most weekends. Families in summer, couples in October when the leaves come down gold and copper, and the lake goes still as dark glass. The income is steady, private, entirely none of anyone else's concern. But every few weeks, usually on a Sunday, I drive out there alone. I make coffee. I sit in one of those Adirondack chairs at the end of the dock. The heron still claims the far bank as if ownership were a matter of posture, and I respect that in him. Sometimes I think about what Elias said to me the morning he filed. He said, "Cal, The most dangerous man in any room is the one they already counted out. I think about that often, because the thing about building houses is that you learn something most people never do. What looks finished from the outside is never the whole story. The paint, the trim, the windows catching light. None of that is the real strength. The real strength is underneath. Joists, beams, load-bearing walls, quiet things, hidden things. The structure no one notices until it holds when everything else fails. They looked at me and saw a hospital patient, a frail man, a widower, a signature, a problem to manage. They never thought to ask what was still holding me up underneath. That was their only mistake. It was enough. My name is Calvin Reed. I built homes for most of my life. The most important thing I ever built was the patience to wait until the exact right moment to take mine back.